the Swansea Devil. One of the creepiest objects of all time is a horrifying wood carving of a mischievous devil that has wreaked havoc for over 100 years. He dates back to the 1890s, when an architect crafted him after being denied a job at the local St. Mary's Church. This carving is now known as the Swansea Devil. The architect built a series of red brick offices near the church and put the wooden devil statue on top of the building to overlook the religious office. The architect then cursed the church, claiming that his devil would laugh as their building burnt to the ground. Well, oddly enough, that's exactly what happened. The St. Mary's Church was destroyed during World War II, and yet the devil remained completely undamaged, sitting in the exact same spot. The Swansea Devil stayed there for decade after decade, until 1962, when he suddenly and mysteriously vanished. The church was rebuilt 20 years later, and the devil was found rotting inside of a nearby garage. He once again took up his old perch overlooking the church, but it never did burn down again. He watched the church all the way until 2019, when he was eventually put into the Swansea Museum. Locals say his removal was more for the protection of the church than for the preservation of the devil. Thomas Busby's chair. Perhaps the strangest abandoned object that people don't know enough about is nothing more than a chair, which in the 1600s happened to be the preferred chair of a thug, thief, and drunk named Thomas Busby who lived in North Yorkshire. That doesn't make it super impressive, as many chairs have been owned by some unsavory characters. But there's a little more to the story here. The chair was set up in his favorite inn, and he absolutely hated anyone else sitting in it. Well, Busby ended up killing his wife's father in a fit of rage, bludgeoning the man to death with a hammer. He was found out for his crime and sentenced to death in 1702. He was made to hang from a gibbet with his body dipped in tar, then his body to be placed on display outside of his favorite inn, which soon after his death was renamed the Busby Stoop Inn until it closed in 2012. But here's where the abandoned object comes in. One version of the story says that Busby's last order of business was to curse the chair before he died, claiming that anyone who sat in his favorite chair would meet a swift death. Apparently, people took the threat very seriously. There was even a report in 1894 about a guy who sat in the chair and then was found the next morning hung from outside from a post. To keep people safe, the chair was eventually abandoned and hung from the ceiling so nobody could sit in it. To this day, the chair is still hung from a ceiling to keep others safe, though it's now sitting in a small museum in the town of Thirsk. I wouldn't sit in a chair with a curse on it. Would you? Foxtrot-class submarine. The Foxtrot-class submarine, currently abandoned inside of a dry dock in Kronstadt, Russia, is one of the coolest abandoned objects seen in the world today, and one of the most mysterious. The Foxtrot submarine was a diesel-electric patrol sub crafted by the Soviet Union, designed to replace the more primitive Zulu class of submarines. The first Foxtrot entered the Navy back in 1958, and by 1983, at least 58 of these vehicles had been built for the Soviet Navy. It had an underwater endurance of about 10 days, it was extremely crowded on board, and by the time the last submarine was launched, it was completely outdated and obsolete. Still, the Russians used these submarines all the way until 2000, when the final Foxtrot was scrapped and disposed of. Now, this abandoned submarine is believed to have come from the Libyan Navy. Not all the submarines were only used by Russia. They made some for the Ukrainian Navy, the Indian Navy, the Libyan Navy, and even the Cuban Revolutionary Navy. It's highly likely that the destroyed body of the submarine currently abandoned in Kronstadt was taken to be scrapped, then completely forgotten about and abandoned. Devil coins. Speaking of the church and the devil, workers who were renovating Bath Abbey in the United Kingdom made a startling discovery. According to Fox News, a pair of strange, mysterious coins depicting the devil himself were found beneath one of the seats inside of the church. There's Latin writing on one of the coins that translates to English as the City of Devils. And there's a date on it that says 1973. According to archaeological experts, The coin refers to a strange incident that happened on the Danish island of Anholt in the same year the coin was marked. The incident involved 13 ritual sites being found by local residents, with artifacts including weird masks, inexplicable stone formations, black candles, a fake shrunken head on a stake, and even a bunch of bones wrapped up in string. The incident sparked concern that a cult of devil worshippers was possibly holding black mass on the island. To this day, it's unclear how the coins commemorating this strange black mass made it to Bath Abbey, but you can bet it wasn't just a coincidence. Abandoned Foxtrot Navy submarine. This abandoned Foxtrot Soviet submarine was apparently delivered to the Libyan Navy from the USSR sometime between 1976 and 1983. It was one of 6 submarines given to the Libyan Navy, and perhaps one of the only remaining vehicles. 4 out of the 6 of these submarines were decommissioned by the end of the 1900s and cannibalized to keep the remaining 2 submarines working for as long as possible. This abandoned sub, which is apparently sitting in a rural part of Russia, was likely ripped apart to fix other submarines. There isn't much more information about it, other than the fact that it's definitely not functional. It has been abandoned for a very long time, and it doesn't appear as though anyone will be coming to its rescue anytime soon. These submarines have been obsolete for some time, and like a lot of the old Soviet war machines, it's been forgotten and left to decay. Someone could probably steal this submarine and refurbish it if they had the right equipment, and get back underwater with it. But the government would probably not be too happy about that. Castle Village. There's an abandoned castle village in Turkey called Burj Al Baba, and it's beyond creepy. At first glance, it doesn't even look like a village. It looks like a set piece for some kind of weird Disney movie. In fact, looking at the pictures of the abandoned castle village, you would think you were looking at tiny replica objects, but these are, in fact, houses. They were constructed for luxury buyers in the foreign community. But like many of the abandoned objects sitting around the world today, this place never saw any action. The completely ridiculous homes were never lived in. It's currently sitting empty in the northwestern region of Turkey, and according to Business Insider, the developers of the project have already filed for bankruptcy and backed out of all their purchases. The result is that we have a weird, almost dystopian Disney village that looks like a bunch of hollowed-out Lego houses. The roads aren't built, there's no electricity, and it doesn't look like anyone's going to move in anytime soon. What's even weirder about this abandoned village is that the developers wanted to heat the homes using a natural hot spring in the area. The chief executive officer even told the New York Times that people would be able to drink the water, that the water would be able to heal kidney stones, and that by bathing in the natural spring water that would be flowing through the taps, a person could heal their skin problems, even curing rheumatism and slipped discs. The Basano vase. The Basano vase was given to a bride on the evening before her wedding in the 15th century. This was no ordinary vase. The woman was actually murdered the same night while holding the vase in her hands. She never made it to the altar to get married. After her death, the vase was passed down from one member of the family to the next, and each member of the family that took possession of the vase died. As you can imagine, the family eventually caught on to what was happening and locked the vase away in storage. But it's been reported that the vase resurfaced in 1988, with a note written on it that warned whoever owned the vase would die. The man who apparently bought it from an auction in 1988 died just 3 months after finding it. There is absolutely no information on where the vase is now, or if any of these stories really happened the way the legend says. But apparently, this is a very real object that's somehow managed to murder everyone who tried to own it. It was apparently last seen when warehouse agents disposed of it in an unknown location. Do you believe in cursed objects? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Give this video a like and hit that subscribe button for more videos like these. The Castellnou pools. The Castellnou pools are abandoned objects located near Barcelona. These pools were apparently used by people in the 1980s to cool off during the summer season. People would bus in from all over the country just to play in these giant, refreshing pools. There was also mini golf, a cafeteria, and some very large trampolines nearby for the locals' amusement. However, one year, rumors began to spread that the pools were not safe and were even deadly. Also, it was rumored that several children had died from jumping on the trampolines. The rumors ended up scaring all the locals, and people stopped showing up to the pools. They were eventually abandoned and neglected, and today they are a ghostly shell of their past glory, mostly adored by filmmakers and ghost hunters. However, it's never been confirmed that there is any supernatural activity involved in these weird pools. It's highly likely that they're just very creepy looking. And so some people think there are ghosts hanging around. The ruins can still be seen today of these once glorious pools, now decrepit and certainly not a safe place to go swimming. These would have been a cool place to shoot a music video, though. Have you ever gone to an abandoned pool? What did you find there? Why did you go? Tell me about it in the comment section down below. Then remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already. There are more awesome videos just like this one coming out all the time. The rides at Joyland. There's nothing more fascinating than an abandoned amusement park, which is why the Joyland amusement park in Wichita, Kansas is next on the list. This bizarre attraction was in operation for 55 years, open from between 1949 and 2006. Now, the once prosperous amusement park is home to a horde of strange abandoned objects that would make for a very creepy backdrop to a Stephen King movie. The park was originally founded by a man named Lester Ottaway and his trio of sons. During the park's peak, there were over 24 attractions, including a wooden roller coaster ride. But the story of the abandoned objects in this park gets a little tragic. Lester Ottaway passed away in the middle of the 1950s, and his sons then sold the family park. The new buyers spent 30 years trying to make the park succeed, adding all kinds of new and crazy rides. And then, a little girl was injured in April of 2004 after falling 30 feet, or about 9 meters, off the Ferris wheel. This spelled doom for the park, which ultimately closed in the summer of 2004. Now, the giant slide is covered in leaves and branches, the original Joyland wooden roller coaster is sitting with its paint peeling off, and the rest of the park is in a horrible state of disrepair. But if you're interested in cool abandoned rides, this is definitely the place to check out on your next urban exploring adventure. Have you ever gone to an abandoned amusement park? What did you see there? Was it scary? Tell me about your experiences in the comments section below. Then remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already for more amazing videos just like this one. Annabelle. Anyone else afraid of dolls? The Annabelle doll is without a doubt one of the creepiest objects that has ever existed on Earth. Unlike the doll from the famous horror movie, the true inspiration for Annabelle is a Raggedy Ann doll with button eyes, cute yarn hair, and a fairly innocent demeanor. This doll is cuddly and completely harmless, but looks can be deceiving. The actual doll is locked inside of a glass case at the Warren's Occult Museum in Connecticut. The doll is apparently so evil that it can never be released from the glass prison it's currently sitting in. So much for innocent and cuddly. But you're probably wondering how this doll came to exist. According to USA Today, the original Annabelle began to terrorize the world in 1970 after being discovered in a hobby shop. A mother purchased the doll as a gift for her daughter, and that was when everything went crazy. The doll started to levitate and then tried to kill everyone in the family, even trying to strangle a family friend. The Warrens were called in to investigate, just like in the movie, and it turned out that the doll had a dark and demonic spirit possessing it. Ed Warren was forced to take the doll and lock it in his museum for safekeeping. And there, this disturbing object has remained, even after Ed's death in 2006. The doll is actually so dangerous, even while still in its cage, that the keepers of the Warren Museum have a priest come in every day to bless it. The Belcourt Castle chairs. Rhode Island is one of the oldest settlements in the United States, established back in 1690. It's also home to the Belcourt Castle, one of the most incredible abandoned buildings in the country. The castle was constructed by an architect named Richard Morris, who had designed the castle for a bachelor in 1894. However, the bachelor only resided in the extensive home for about 8 weeks out of the year. Then, when he died in 1908, the castle fell into disrepair. The castle sat abandoned until the 1940s, when it was sold to an entrepreneur who wanted to turn it into a car museum. Of course, that never happened. The property was then used to hold jazz festivals, but the upkeep of the property was neglected. In 1956, the property was acquired by the Tenney family, who filled it full of strange antiques and then basically left it as a living museum. Many of these antiques proved to be haunted. This includes a set of 17th century samurai armor, a mirror from the 18th century that hangs inside of the music room, and a pair of old salt chairs that might be the creepiest abandoned objects in history. These chairs are located in the Gothic ballroom, and those who have visited the empty castle have claimed that the chairs are haunted by spirits, with one occasion having 70 visitors witnessing a bolt of lightning shoot from one of the chairs. 1962 Ford Thunderbird. A 1962 Ford Thunderbird had recently been found on sale online after being completely abandoned. The sellers of the car have described it as a barn find, spending at least 2 decades sitting completely unused in storage. And yet, despite being left to rot in a worthless old storage unit, the car was discovered in near-perfect condition. Even after an estimated 22 years in total isolation with nobody caring for it, the car still runs and drives amazingly, proving once and for all that the American automotive industry back in the 1960s was the absolute best. Plus, one thing that's really great about an old car sitting abandoned for so long is that it comes with some very cool goodies. For example, when the Thunderbird was finally removed from storage, it was discovered with the owner's manual, the workshop manual, and even the convertible top manual. These may not sound as exciting as something like first edition Pokemon cards to some of our younger viewers, but to car enthusiasts, this is a pretty incredible abandoned discovery. Even more incredible is that the car only has about 73,000 miles or 120,000 kilometers on it, meaning that after sitting for 22 years, it has less mileage than most trade-ins you find at the dealership. The Pebbles of Koh Hingham. Koh Hingham is a small, isolated island in Thailand, decorated with precious, cursed stones. Yes, I said cursed stones. It's completely uninhabited, and there's really no reason to visit, but there are some people that still do. So far as the legend goes, the Thai god of Taru Tau cursed the entire island, saying that anyone who would visit and take a pebble from the land would be cursed for the rest of their lives. What's wild about this story is that the National Park Office of Thailand actually receives dozens of stones every year in the mail from people who didn't believe in the curse and who thought taking the pebble off the island would just be a funny thing to do. But then they realized that it was actually not funny at all, and their lives were becoming dramatically worse when they got home. Thai people actually visit this island just to pray to the pebbles. They make small structures out of them and then wish upon the stones. This is all fine and dandy, so long as nobody accidentally takes a pebble home with them in their pocket or shoe, as they will surely have horrible luck. This is one case where finding a beach rock in your luggage could mean certain doom. Rare Chinese vase. A rare Chinese vase was abandoned in a French attic sometime in the 1900s. The Chinese vase sat in the attic collecting dust for at least 3 generations. The man who discovered the vase in the attic of his family home believes that it probably was purchased by his great-uncle a very long time ago, perhaps in the beginning of the 1900s. A little curious about how much the vase could be worth, the guy took it to be examined by professionals, where he learned that it could be worth upwards of $850,000. The vase is the only one of its kind, according to Sotheby's Paris, the same company that put the vase up for sale at auction. It was probably produced in China during the reign of the Qianlong Emperor between 1735 and 1796. The only other pieces of pottery like this are currently sitting in a collection at the National Palace Museum in Taipei, which shows you just how rare the vase is. This also goes to show that you should always be curious about what's sitting inside your attic, as you never know if you have a $1 million artifact that's been abandoned by an old member of the family. There are a lot of stories about abandoned antiques in attics that turn out to be worth millions. Keep your eyes open and you might be lucky enough to find one of your own. The Bridge to Nowhere. There is a bridge to nowhere located in the San Gabriel Mountains near Los Angeles. The strange and abandoned bridge was apparently constructed in 1936 over a small gap of the East Fork of the San Gabriel River. The bridge was originally supposed to link between the roadway and the valley to the south, but it ended up being nothing. In the spring of 1938, there was a huge flood that shifted the landscape of the canyon and literally destroyed the road that had been leading to the bridge. The result was that the road never got rebuilt and the entire construction project was abandoned. But the bridge was already finished, so it was just kind of left in the middle of nowhere to serve no purpose. Now the bridge is working as a tourist attraction. It's an abandoned structure that you can see on an afternoon walk just outside of Los Angeles. In fact, the Bridge to Nowhere is a very popular hiking area. People actually come here to picnic and swim in the river underneath the bridge. The scenery is fantastic, you get the best sunrises and sunsets, and the abandoned bridge looks elegant, smack dab in the middle of an otherwise barren wasteland. You can even bungee jump from the side of the bridge if you're feeling brave. Dead alien. There's nothing quite as creepy as finding a dead alien body in the snow. In a recent video uploaded online, two Russian men were out walking one day and discovered something bizarre half buried in the ice. It looked like a dead alien, and it was found in a popular UFO hot zone near the Siberian city of Irkutsk. The limp extraterrestrial was allegedly found near a tree stump, just waiting for somebody to come around and locate it. It was about 3 feet or 0.9 meters tall, with a large football-shaped head and skinny limbs, as well as gray skin and large black eyes. The thing in the video actually looks like what you would imagine an alien to look like. A lot like E.T. actually. The men of course took photos and posted them online for the whole world to see. However, this might not actually be an alien, as there's no solid proof that whatever they found isn't from our planet. This could just be an inanimate object that looks a lot like an alien, and the men who found it just decided to make up the crazy story as a prank. Some people claim that it's really just a rubber doll, and that the video was a total hoax. If so, the clever engineers of the video get an A for effort. Even if it wasn't a real alien, it was still a pretty creepy thing to stumble upon. What if one of these days the Russian pranksters actually do find an alien buried in the snow, but no one believes them? Mummified baby. Now, here's something extraordinarily strange and scary. A mummified baby was apparently found abandoned inside a house attic that belonged to the great-uncle of a man named Charles Peavy, and it has caused a huge controversy. But to understand this bizarre abandoned object, we need to go back to the beginning. According to the report from Seacoast Online, Charles Peavy's uncle had loved a Hawaiian woman about 80 or 90 years ago, and she had carried his child. But unfortunately, the child died at birth and was stillborn. For whatever reason, Charles Peavy's great-uncle kept the corpse of the baby and mummified it, then stuffed it into his attic and forgot about it. The other really crazy part is that Charles Peavy has a collection of family memorabilia that goes back 2 centuries. And the mummified baby is just considered to be part of the collection, added to it when they found it preserved inside his great-uncle's attic in Manchester. But here's where the controversy comes in. Charles Peavy's 4-year-old niece was overheard talking about the mummified baby with another kid at school, saying that her uncle was a murderer and he kept a dead baby in the house. Police got involved, the mummy was actually confiscated, and forensic anthropologists examined the mummy and refused to give it back. After all, it was literally a dead baby. Skeleton Temple. The abandoned skeleton of a strange temple in Taiwan is quite a bit different from the picturesque abandoned bridge above the San Gabriel River. This temple is a hollow and oddly creepy shell. The temple appears to be unfinished, and it's located in Taoyuan, just a short train ride from the capital of Taipei. In fact, the building is completely covered in wild foliage and overgrown trees. The abandoned temple is next to a small farm, as well as a few other vacant lots that appear to be abandoned. The temple is also filled with very strange things, such as trash, a horde of bottles, and thousands of small white pellets from an airsoft gun. Someone must have been doing some target practice inside of the abandoned structure. But here's where things get really incredible. In one of the very back unfinished rooms of the temple, there is an abandoned blue sofa chair sitting in the corner and an altar with a stool in front of it. As if someone were visiting the temple on a regular basis, even though it was deserted. If you find yourself in Taiwan and are thinking about exploring some abandoned places and checking out all of the weird abandoned objects in the skeleton temple, you better hope that you don't run into whoever's using this place as their own private shrine. The haunted wedding dress. An unidentified woman from the United States was forced to sell her wedding dress after it possessed her home. This is one of the creepiest objects ever discovered, especially considering the vintage wedding dress, which the woman claimed to have found in an abandoned gold rush town while on a remote hike, caused a chain of unbelievably bizarre events to occur. There were moving items in the house, unexplained rancid odors, swarms of bugs that couldn't be explained, and a general feeling of unease that eventually resulted in the woman getting rid of the dress that she had found. First of all, finding a wedding dress in an abandoned town is already creepy. Second of all, taking it home with you doesn't sound like the best idea to me, right? Would you take it home? Let me know in the comments. But what's also kind of funny about this is that the woman actually tried to make a profit off the dress that she had found in the abandoned town for free. She put the old and seemingly cursed dress up for sale on Facebook for $600, advertising it as a very real haunted wedding gown that could possess a person's home. I guess there's a market for everything. It's unclear whether she eventually sold the dress or not, but the right thing to do would have been to burn the possessed item and then dump it in the river. Witches and cat bones. Some very creepy objects were recently discovered by archaeologists inside of a 17th century cottage during a construction project in Lancashire. The cottage was found near Lower Black Moss Reservoir out in the rural countryside. Archaeologists had been brought in to survey the area before engineers could get to work with the construction project, and they found the remains of a strange building hidden underneath a grass mound. According to the recent report from BBC News, historians are now claiming that the cottage may have belonged to one of the infamous Pendle witches. Inside the bizarre cottage, archaeologists found a sealed room complete with cat bones bricked inside of the wall, which were likely used by witches to protect the cottage and those within it from evil spirits. However, there were no human remains discovered and no clue as to why the structure was abandoned and covered up with earth. I personally would never go in a building like this. It's too risky and too likely to be haunted. Hospital relics. An urban explorer has just come across one of the strangest places that has ever been found throughout all his adventures. It all happened when a photographer broke into a rural abandoned hospital near Atlanta, Georgia, and documented the entire thing. The hospital was apparently abandoned in 2010, but nobody cleared away any of the objects from inside. The result was that everything being used in the hospital before 2010 was still in there for the photographer to capture in spooky clarity. Not only was the hospital creepy for the fact that it was an abandoned hospital, but all the abandoned medical equipment made it even freakier, such as the abandoned hospital beds, the still and quiet emergency room, the silent radiology department with empty waiting chairs, and the fully functioning MRI machine. The place was an urban explorer's dream location, especially since everything inside the hospital was left pretty much brand new. According to what the urban explorer said, the hospital had been one of the biggest employers in the rural area, but it lacked profitability because there weren't enough clientele coming in. Basically, there weren't enough people getting sick to keep the hospital running. So the hospital ran out of local funding and the county officials didn't have a choice. They had to close the facility, leaving everything inside with hopes that it would one day open yet again. So far, everything inside the creepy abandoned hospital is in the exact same place as when it closed, just waiting to be used again. The Cyprus Sex Curse Tablet. In 2008, archaeologists found one of the most disturbing lead tablets ever discovered. The strange tablet was found on the southern coast of Cyprus, and it apparently came out of the old city of Amethyst back in the 7th century AD. This was a time when Christianity was well established in the area, but what makes this such a disturbing object is that it was inscribed on the tablet in Greek with a very specific curse. The curse was clearly aimed at a man, as it had something along the lines of, "May your private parts hurt when you make love." The tablet also had a carving on it, depicting a man holding something in his right hand that resembles an hourglass. The head of the Athens Archaeological School, Pierre Aubert, said that the curse was probably created by some kind of shaman or witchcraft practitioner who had survived on the island from the pre-Christian era and was angered by the new religion. However, it's not clear who the curse was meant for or if it ever worked. Giant Monopoly. A man in California discovered something incredible when he decided to rip up the carpet in his house. What he found was a giant game of Monopoly that had been abandoned by the previous owners of the house and hidden beneath a boring carpet. The man from California moved into the bungalow house back in 2003, but it wasn't until just recently that he decided to renovate the house. What he discovered underneath the carpet was not only a massive game of Monopoly, but it was an adult Monopoly game, with silhouettes of naked women instead of the typical community chest. After discovering the strange Monopoly board, the man was actually able to get into contact with the previous owners of the house. However, they would not reveal the mystery behind their adult board game, which, for some strange reason, they decided to paint onto the floor of one of the bedrooms. And while the new owner of the game wanted to create life-size pieces to go with it, his wife at the time wouldn't let him. She forced him to paint over the Monopoly board on the floor. Shortly after, they got divorced. Unearthing that Monopoly game might have been bad luck for him. Into the wild. There is an abandoned relic like no other sitting in the Alaskan wilderness. Or at least, there was. The bus is known popularly as the Into the Wild bus, or sometimes as Bus 142, or the Magic Bus. It has been sitting in the Alaskan wilderness, completely abandoned for years, and it became famous as the place where a certain young man documented his own last days over a period of 114 days back in 1992. Because of the cult sensation over the movie and book Into the Wild, this abandoned bus has been a sort of lure for people to venture into the wilderness and find it. After all, this was the place where Christopher McCandless hiked to, stayed in, and then died from starvation. Christopher had kept a journal of his entire experience, and after he was discovered dead, John Krakauer wrote a book in 1996 based on the young man's journal. And while a lot of people have seen the movie, not many people know that this is a real bus and a real location and a real thing that happened. At least, it was until just recently. According to the Tampa Bay Times, the Alaska National Guard flew the bus out of the forest in 2020 after too many people died trying to reach the famous abandoned landmark. According to the Department of Natural Resources Commissioner, people are encouraged to enjoy Alaska's wild areas safely, and the bus was simply too dangerous and cost too many visitors their lives. If you ask me, this is an actual travesty. The Dybbuk box. The Dybbuk box was a curious object most recently owned by a guy named Kevin Mannis. It was a wine cabinet that Kevin had acquired through his furniture refinishing business in Portland, Oregon. According to Kevin's first-hand account, he got the box at a state auction in 2001, and before that, it had belonged to a Polish Holocaust survivor. When Kevin opened the box, he found 2 pennies from the 1920s, a piece of blonde hair wrapped up in a cord, another piece of brown hair wrapped up in a cord, and a small statue engraved with the Hebrew word shalom. After that, the trouble started. This Dybbuk box apparently caused Kevin to experience horrific nightmares. It allegedly gave his mother a stroke, and every owner since has experienced heaps of misery, while also experiencing nightmares of an old hag and smelling cat urine throughout their house. In modern times, the Dybbuk box is living inside the Haunted Museum in Las Vegas. It was recently investigated by the writer for the Skeptical Inquirer named Kinney Biddle, who claims that the box is actually a minibar from New York. Kinney claims that the stories of hauntings that go with the box were made up by Kevin Mannis as a publicity stunt. Either way, I certainly wouldn't be taking this box home with me. Craig-e-Clair Castle. The Craig-e-Clair Castle in New York is one of the strangest abandoned buildings in the United States. It's located in the Catskills Mountains and is surrounded by so much mystery and intrigue that it just had to be put on the list. It's also known as the Dundas Castle, and nobody seems to be certain of its history. Nobody knows exactly when construction began on the original project, though educated estimates say that it began as a summer lodge for a man named Bradford Lee Gilbert in the 1880s. But when Gilbert passed away in 1911, that was when the castle really began to take shape. But here's where the story of this abandoned building gets really weird. After Gilbert died, Ralph Dundas took over the property for himself. But he died just 10 years later. And the year after his death, his wife was committed to a sanitarium. The castle ended up being abandoned. At some point in time, the property was purchased by the Masons, but even today, the place is decrepit and empty. Some say that on the full moon, the 3 heart-shaped ponds on the property even fill with blood. But of course, this has never scientifically been proven. The Myrtles Plantation Mirror. The Myrtles Plantation in Louisiana is one of the strangest and most haunted places in all of the United States. Legend says that the plantation is home to at least a dozen ghosts. It's also been reported that at least 10 murders have occurred in the house throughout its history. There are a lot of different stories surrounding this horrific plantation, with tales of torture, sadness, and of course, despair. But one of the strangest stories involves an abandoned object that can apparently still be found inside the house, and that apparently holds the spirit of a girl named Sarah Woodruff and her 2 young children. So far as the legend goes, the mirror somehow managed to trap the spirit of Sarah and her kids after they were poisoned by an unknown murderer. Even all these years after the plantation was abandoned, people still claim that they have seen handprints and visages inside the mirror. While we obviously have no scientific evidence that this is real, when you see a handprint appear in an abandoned mirror and you feel your blood run cold, you don't really need science. Of course, one of the reasons why this plantation and the objects within it are so haunted is because the house reputedly was built over an Indian burial ground, but again, this is just hearsay. Alien money. We've already checked out a pair of satanic coins found in the United Kingdom, and now it's time to look at some coins that were recently discovered dating back to ancient Egypt that could be proof that an alien civilization has visited the Earth in the past. One of the coins was found during a home renovation, and it depicts a spaceship hovering on one side and what appears to be an alien emperor on the other side. The alien emperor has surprisingly dignified features, with shallow black eyes and a bald skull. As you can imagine, extraterrestrial enthusiasts are adamant that this is proof that aliens indeed visited the Egyptians in the past. One of them must have accidentally left behind his coin purse. Of course, these coins could be fakes. We honestly have no way of knowing. As reported by The Sun, no experts have volunteered to verify the coins, so as of right now, all we have is hope and speculation. Abandoned heads. In the state of Virginia, there are 42 very creepy and abandoned heads of presidents that were apparently made by an artist from Houston who was inspired after he drove past Mount Rushmore. According to Insider Magazine, the statues were displayed for about 6 years in the President's Park in Williamsburg, but nobody really wanted to look at a bunch of creepy stone statues of presidents. So they were eventually transported to Croker, where they were supposed to be put inside of a stone crusher and destroyed. But rather than that happening, the guy hired to destroy them actually spent over $10,000 bringing them to his own property so that they could be saved. What's really crazy is that the presidential heads are now more popular because they're sitting in what appears to be an abandoned field on this guy's property than they ever were when they were at President's Park. And of course, this is because people just love abandoned stuff. The chained oak. The chained oak is one of the more incredible abandoned objects that nobody really knows what to make of. It's located in the middle of nowhere in the United Kingdom and it's really nothing more than an old tree wrapped up in chains. But does it ever look strange? The tree was apparently wrapped up in chains back in 1821 because of a curse that came about when the Earl of Shrewsbury refused to give a desperate woman the money she asked for. She placed a curse on the tree, saying that every branch that fell from the tree would cause a member of the Earl's family to die. Shortly after this happened, one of the Earl's relatives apparently died under very mysterious circumstances. And so, the Earl chained up all the branches of the oak tree so that none of them could fall down. Of course, it's extremely difficult to say whether this legend is true or not, but it is a plain fact that the oak has been fastened with chains for dozens of years. Nobody has the gall to go in and take the chains down, and for the foreseeable future, the tree and its chains will remain abandoned in the forest. What's the coolest abandoned object you've ever found? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and come back soon.